the big one to start with, Kathryn, what is hyperacusis?
Okay, so hyperacusis is a reduced tolerance or increased sensitivity to sounds that are perceived as normal to the majority of the population, or were perceived as normal to the individual before they had hyperacusis. So it's about, although we're using the word normal there, we're trying to bring it back to how people felt beforehand. So it's that oversensitivity to sounds that you weren't sensitive to before you got hyperacusis. For people that are experiencing hyperacusis, the sounds can be overwhelming, intense, painful, unpleasant, and can be frightening for them because they come in at them and it can be any sounds at all. So this could be someone dropping some keys on the floor, could be perceived as really loud to this person, you know, washing up. So if you imagine when you're stood on the road and you've got an ambulance going past, how loud that feels to you. A person with hyperacusis would feel that that is how loud someone slamming a door is for them. So it's that kind of perception there.
I had it myself, and I'm sure countless of people have had it, Kathryn, and it was really complicating the matters of tinnitus. I remember when it was really at its most really dramatic, that I remember very well a postman knocked on the door, and I ran upstairs crying. It was just so loud. I couldn't cope with the loudness, and it felt like the pressure of it as well was really hurting me. And it was so strange. And I was a musician, I was recording an album at that time. So I do remember the most shocking aspect of it was what is happening to me, because it wasn't the same as just having tinnitus. Everything seemed larger and over exaggerated, and I became smaller as everything around me became much more prevalent in a world of audiological nightmare sounds. It was really horrible. So going into that one, Kathryn, would you say then, what's the relationship then between hyperacusis and tinnitus? Because there has to be one.
There is one. We are still delving into this, and I'm sure that everybody will be aware that we still always look into tinnitus and the source of tinnitus and the causes of tinnitus. And we know that there is something that happens between tinnitus and hyperacusis, because we know that, for instance, 40% of tinnitus patients will experience hyperacusis. We don't know the full connection of what's happening there. It's been looked into, but it's basically because your auditory cortex, so where your brain deals with the sounds you're hearing, because tinnitus is happening, where we believe that cells are firing and that's what's causing the tinnitus potentially. There's things to do with whether there's this after effect that causes the hyperacusis. So there's something in the mechanisms behind them that potentially link each other, because it's all to do with that, just something not switching off in your auditory system that could potentially be doing it. But the link there is we know there's the link. It's just it's tangled together. How do we pull apart what is the problems associated with tinnitus to what's the problems associated with hyperacusis? And that's really hard to do, and especially if you think about the years that we've looked at tinnitus and trying to work out exactly what's happening in your brain and ears for that, to then add another layer where it could be hearing loss involved and hyperacusis involved, and it just becomes quite a complex web that we are slowly pulling apart. I often call the tinnitus and hyperacusis a bit like a big ball of string that you're trying to find the end for, and you're pulling each bits out, and you're just not quite getting to that nice piece of string being nicely put out, or your Christmas lights put out. So it's not really a full answer there, because I can't give you one, but the way in which you describe it is very accurate to how I have people describe tinnitus and hyperacusis together. It is a very different experience for both of them at different times, and they can kind of conflict against each other. You're hearing a sound at the same time as all other sounds suddenly become very much louder for you, and it can make it quite complicated.
That's a great answer, and because it's multifaceted, this problem. I mean, for me, it was the tinnitus that came first, and that was really comfortable for years and years and years. It was just triggered by a very bad accident, and suddenly this over awareness of hearing, which was a kind of bungled irrigation that went on in my ear, so to get rid of earwax. So suddenly, bang! It was just, everything was too much. The accident, and then having then even more of an enormous sound kind of canvas in front of me was just too overwhelming, and it was really complicated. And I really, my heart goes out to the people that have both, because I couldn't really then get a perspective on the tinnitus till really I'd mastered the idea of looking at the hyperacusis. But for me, I was very lucky because I was struggling, and so I had these earplugs. So I had all different types, Kathryn. So I'd have this in my ear, and then I'd have these. I still kept these, and that was even when I was just driving in my car. I mean, it was so complicated, and I couldn't get my head around what I had to do because it was just too complicated. That kind of gave me a respite. But then, you know, I'd only hear a loud sound when these weren't there. So even like the sound of a toaster, or somebody putting a tray in the oven and slamming it, it set me back. It felt like another week again. So it was just a hopeless situation. It wasn't till I got hearing therapy for an afternoon, Kathryn, and I was able to just get some clinical information that gave me the facts as to what could hurt and what couldn't hurt me. And that really helped me. It was good for my mind. I needed to know what the rules of the game were, really, in a way. So it was then I started to have more sound that was being released. So I wasn't blocking sound in, and only using the ear defenders at times where I thought it was appropriate with loud music. So you're absolutely right. It was so complicated.